I've been thinking about Lot. I didn't say I've been thinking a lot. I said I've been thinking about Lot. I'm talking about the nephew of Abraham. Lot is one of those players in the Bible story who might not be as well known as certain others, like Abraham or Moses or Peter, but he is a person who I imagine there are quite a few people who recognize him and who are familiar with him, even among those who are not terribly familiar with the Bible in general. They may be familiar with him in no small part, if for no other reason than the unusual way in which he lost his wife. Of course, she is the woman who was turned into a pillar of salt when she turned back to look as God destroyed the city of Sodom, where she and Lot and their family had lived. And that kind of leads into what I've been thinking about with regard to Lot this morning. Lot was not a man without flaws, not a man without mistakes in his life. In fact, I believe it was an error in judgment on his part that led to him settling his family in the vicinity of Sodom to begin with. Nevertheless, Lot is remembered as one of the Bible's good guys. The Apostle Peter, writing centuries later in 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 7, described him as righteous Lot. So, despite Lot's documented poor judgment at times, Lot is still remembered as a righteous man. In fact, that is really the reason that Lot and his family were spared from the destruction that came upon Sodom by God. In Genesis chapter 19, we can read how that angels were sent to Sodom to warn Joshua and his family, and these angels ultimately, when Lot hesitated in leaving, really compelled Lot to leave with his wife and two of his daughters. And again, even at that, unfortunately, not all of them survived because, as we noted a moment ago, Lot's wife disobeyed God's command to not look back as they left the city, and she was turned into a pillar of salt. But it's something about that night, what I would call and what I would assume to be Lot's last night in Sodom. That's what I've been thinking about with regard to him this morning. And what I've been thinking, I believe, is something that has relevance, well, really to Christians in any day and age, but certainly Christians in this day and age in which we live, and certainly in this society in which many of us live. I mentioned Genesis 19 a moment ago, and this is the chapter that records what it is that I'm thinking about. As I said, two angels were sent by God into the city, and it seems pretty evident that these angels appeared to be just ordinary men. In fact, when Lot first saw them, it certainly seems that he assumed that they were ordinary men. He insisted that they come home with him. They had told him they would just camp out in the city square that night, but Lot insisted that they come home with him, apparently for their protection and their safety. And it certainly seems that the other men of the city of Sodom later that night, seems they also thought that these were ordinary men as well, based on their intentions with regard to them. I'm thinking about what is written in Genesis chapter 19 and beginning in verse 4. There it is written, "Now before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both old and young, all the people from every quarter surrounded the house. And they called to Lot and said to him, 'Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may know them carnally.' So Lot went out to them through the doorway, shut the door behind him, and said, 'Please, my brethren, do not do so wickedly. See now, I have two daughters who have not known a man. Please, let me bring them out to you, and you may do to them as you wish. Only do nothing to these men, since this is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof.'" So these men come into the city. Lot takes them into his home to show hospitality to them and to protect them. And then the other men of the city show up, and they demand that these strangers be brought out so that they could have sexual relations with them. Well, Lot, being the righteous man that he is, does not want this to happen, and so he tries to bargain with the men of the city, even offering his own daughters to those wicked men, rather than fail as host and protector of his guests. And by the way, yes, I do believe that that was another error in judgment on Lot's part when he offered his daughters, but fortunately nothing came of that because the men of the city clearly refused his offer. And it is what they are saying as they are refusing his offer that I really find worthy of note. In verse 9 of Genesis 19, same chapter, same episode, these men are speaking, these wicked men of Sodom, and they say, stand back. Then they said, this one came in to stay here, and he keeps acting as a judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. So they pressed hard against the man Lot and came near to break down the door. I take note of what these men of Sodom say about Lot after he tries to stop them from doing the evil thing that they wanted to do at that time. Well, of course, they knew that he was not originally from around there. They even noted in what they said just now that he came in to stay here. Did you notice that in the verse? They said he came in here. They know he's an outsider. He's not from Sodom. But then they also know something else about him. They say he keeps acting as a judge. Apparently, this is not the first time that Lot had spoken out against the wickedness in the city. You know, even today, many Christians know that simply quoting what God has said on a given subject will cause some to condemn us as judges, or, to use the words of the men of Sodom, of acting like a judge. But whatever form Lot's prior words and actions may have taken as he stood for righteousness, it does seem clear from what these men say in this verse that Lot had a reputation among these people. He had a reputation of being different and of not being like them. That's the reputation that righteousness gets you in a society that is given over to unrighteousness. I mentioned a moment ago that many years later, literally many centuries later, the Apostle Peter referred to him as righteous Lot. But take note of what else Peter says about him in that verse. If you look at 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 7, he says that righteous Lot was oppressed. Literally, he was vexed by the filthy conduct of the wicked. That's what made Lot different. He would not take part in such filthiness, and he was bothered that it was taking part at all. It's what has set him apart in the society in which he lived. He was bothered by the wickedness going on all around him, by the disregard for God that men had at that place. And from what we read in Genesis 19, what we just did read in Genesis 19, it was known that he was bothered by it. Well, I read that, and I wonder if we are as bothered by sin as we ought to be, and if society around us knows that we're bothered by it. I wonder if we as Christians are trying as hard as we should to live lives that will distinguish us from the society around us. Can people know that we are different from seeing how we live our lives? I mean, apart from maybe going to church every Sunday, what is it that would indicate to others that we desire to be righteous before God? Are there any activities that we decline to take part in for the simple reason that we don't believe God would approve? Are there things that we insist on being able to do, like worshiping on the Lord's Day, simply because we know that God would rather have us do that than many of the other things that many people will do on that day instead of worshiping Him? The people of Sodom could see that Lot was not like them. I'm wondering, can people around us who make no pretense of trying to serve God see that we are different from them in this most important way? Not that we act inherently superior to them, mind you, or we look down their nose at them. We want to love them, and we want to help them do better, as the Lord does. But all the while, everyone should know that we are different from anyone whose ultimate allegiance is not to God. In Philippians chapter 2 and verse 15, Paul speaks there of the need for Christians to shine as lights in the midst of a very dark world, what he describes there as a crooked and perverse generation. And light stands out in the darkness, doesn't it? And so, because light does stand out in the darkness so much, in the midst of such a dark world, I'll tell you what, I want to stick out like a sore thumb. And if you profess to be a Christian, I hope that you stick out in this way as well. The world needs us to be what we claim to be. The Lord desires it of us. Let's all desire to develop a reputation for being righteous people who put God first. That will make us stand out, but it will make the world a better place too. I hope you have a good day.